I'll say there about what I'll say there about the 50 to 80 player alliances is that it's not that it couldn't work. I think traditionally speaking,
Yo, 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 yo.
almost
That's right.
every vodka. What's up? Almost every kingdom builder that I've played,
Yo,
usually
yo,
has
my
allowed
friend.
somewhere around 175 to like 225 or like 150 to 200 for their average player cap, which is very similar to like MMORPGs, right? I mean, typically the or the guilds in those, if you want to call them that, are usually a little bit bigger as well. I'm sure there are some games that have lower level player caps. But if you lower the player cap to 50 to 80, now the challenge you're going to run into is that you're going to end up having a lot of smaller alliances. And whereas you might view that as being, okay, hey, that could be an okay thing, and maybe it could be. However, when I look at it, it's that, you basically have to try and split at minimum the big alliances at least to three, right? So you're at least going 1 to 3, maybe 1 to 2, right? For the alliances that are closer to like 160, but somewhere in that 1 to 2, 1 to 3 range, right? You can, if you want to average it at 1.1 to 1.25, or sorry, 1 to 2.5 for a ratio, right? You could. And then the thing is that if you're thinking about how to utilize the union system, it's not to say that you can't have like 10, 15, 16 alliances and that wouldn't work. It could. It's just you'd probably have more than that if you're in like a really healthy kingdom, and it
Yeah,
just may
that's the
not
hope.
it may not be viable to have that many, because then you have to think about flag pathing, and usually for most of the routes that you are going to flag to, it wouldn't be sustainable to have that many active alliances, right? You can maybe get away with 10 or 12 if you're taking different paths. But if you drop the player caps to that, you're going to have a lot more than that, right? Maybe 2, 3 times that amount, if not more, especially if it's a really healthy and active kingdom. I for one am okay with them limiting it. I'm actually okay that they put a hard cap of 200, right? I'm not opposed to that. That doesn't bother me in any way. I think it's better to have something like that rather than kind of having it be a free for all, because at least by putting somewhat of a cap on it, it dissuades, or it may dissuade some of the alliances from just doing like a mine thing where they just kind of take everything, right? Just so they can try and get that extra cap going beyond 200. So I think I'm more in favor of what they're doing now versus them condensing. I just think that it would cause a lot more unforeseen challenges for that
Yeah.
particular point. It doesn't mean
It's
that it's bad.
absolutely what you said with the behemoths. Because it's early in the season, and Blood's like tells the little team, "Hey, you can take that behemoth for first rewards." Where before they would have
Yeah.
took it and kept it for the member cap. So now you're getting little teams like, "Oh, I can get the first capture on this," and that it just helps more people.
Yeah, I
You
saw
okay?
it as more what it would do is I was thinking it would create more player relations, which therefore creates more dysfunction, right? And PvP. And then you would have more unions, right? Where you debuff the union as a whole for each union they take on. So, maybe it's like -2% across all stats, across all members per union. And those stack, right? And it would create a more free for all environment in the game. And the reason why I like that is because actually I think that highlights what's great about Call of Dragons is actually not the massive wars, but more of the skirmishes. Because it has better micro combat than ROK or something like that, right? Garrison, rally, it's a bit boring in Call of Dragons. The open field fighting, and more of the little skirmishes that occur are where I personally find it to sort of shine a light more on Call of Dragons in and of itself, as opposed to its predecessor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No. I'm with you there. I think on the behemoth point that Ice brought up is, yeah. I mean, it is a little rough. I don't. It's hard to see what they did in the first season, and then they just started limiting and taking away behemoths really without, what I would argue a justifiable reason. There really wasn't a solid explanation that they gave for it. And overall, I just don't think it makes a lot of logistical sense, especially if you're trying to then eventually introduce home kingdoms, unless the home kingdoms are going to resemble season 1, right? Therefore, maybe they'll have more behemoths than we see now, or at least you could argue since they made the last big change, which was many updates ago. And then the other way to view it is when you look at the KVK situation, having limited behemoths doesn't really inspire having multiple alliances. And this is the thing that I think people really need to understand is that if the game wants to make money, right, they need to have war. It can't be lawless war, right? But it needs to be kind of this healthy medium of where you are allowing war at interval stages. And then obviously, you can crescendo that into like free for all or however it may play out. But obviously, you need to have war. On top of that, you need to have healthy kingdoms, right? Because no one's going to stick around if there's no community aspect. And I probably should more specifically say you're not going to have a healthy majority, right, that would stick around if there's just like a lack of community aspect on top of there being a lack of, how you're map building and how you're being able to entice people to go out in PvP. A lot of these things are all connected, right, from one. It really starts with needing to build something that is healthy in your home kingdom, that has a lot of good community and social engagement. And if you end up building something that has more than just 2 or 3 alliances, right? So you look at kingdoms that are basically kind of already going along this default path of turning into mega alliances. And that's because unless you apply some level of oversight or some level of external actions, then that's just the trend that all kingdoms are going to go to. People are just going to kind of funnel like pyramids. Doesn't mean everyone's going to do it, but some will. And, it's easy for things to kind of snowball at that point, which is usually the average trend for when new kingdoms open up within the genre. And so from there, you have to look at, right, and we're kind of starting this from the root and then getting there, is that when this happens, if you think about the way that some players will gravitate towards the top, if you don't have balance, right, of alliance power, and you have people kind of funneling into this mega alliance structure, that leans more towards having fewer alliances than it does more. If you have fewer alliances, your player drop-off is very high at that point. And if more players are dropping off from your kingdom, whether that's not playing anymore, whether that's restarting, if that's uninstalling, that's that many less players and overall less alliances you have to go into KVK with you. That also means that's that many more less players and alliances that are going to bring troops into KVK. It also means that that's that much more less players and alliances that are going to potentially spend money on the game, right? So it all turns over into net revenue. And so then you look at how the behemoth factor plays into it. And if you don't have enough behemoths on the map where it viably makes sense to bring in multiple alliances from every kingdom, then you're losing out on the potential amount of sustainable PvP that you can have throughout the entire season, right? Because again, more players and more alliances means more overall troops, which means, once again, more spending on the game. So, yeah, to your point, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you're looking at it from even if you just look at it from a purely monetary standpoint, it doesn't make sense because it's more advantageous for them to cater to at least a big area that can generate them a lot of revenue. And then if we get to like the region thing where you said like no regions anymore,